The evening sky hung low over the city as Ethan Hawley stepped out of his silent luxury car, dressed in old worn clothes that hid every sign of his real life. He looked nothing like the billionaire the world knew, and that was exactly what he wanted. Tonight he wanted to walk through life as an ordinary man, a man without money, without power, without protection, and see who would treat him with real kindness instead of fear or greed. The street he entered was busy, but nobody paid attention to the man in the faded jacket. Ethan moved slowly, taking in the sounds of laughter, arguments, and rushing footsteps. He felt strange without his security guards or his polished shoes, yet he also felt free in a way he had not felt in years. The weight of wealth was gone, and the mask he always wore had fallen away, leaving only a quiet man searching for truth. Tonight Ethan kept walking until he reached a small diner with dim lights and cracked windows, the kind of place he had never visited. In his real life, curiosity pulled him toward the door. He wanted to see how people behaved when they had no idea they were standing near a man who could buy the whole street. He stepped inside and instantly felt dozens of eyes judging his cheap clothes and tired face, yet he also sensed something else. In the back corner he saw a young waitress moving quickly between tables. Her name was Lena, though he did not know it yet. She looked tired, but she smiled at every customer, even the rude ones. Ethan watched her for a moment, feeling a strange pull. He wondered if her smile was real or just part of her job, and that single thought made him stay near the counter, waiting silently until she noticed him and walked his way. Lena greeted him with a warm smile that felt almost out of place in the noisy diner. She asked him what he wanted, and Ethan hesitated, pretending to search his pockets. He knew he carried only a few coins, but he wanted to see how she reacted when she saw his struggle. She waited patiently without any sign of annoyance, and in that patient silence, Ethan felt a soft, unfamiliar emotion. Someone was treating him with respect without knowing anything. Before Ethan could decide what to order, Lena placed a small glass of water in front of him. She said he looked tired and should drink something first. Her kindness surprised him. He was used to people serving him because of his money, not because they cared. She then recommended a simple meal, one of the cheapest on the menu. Ethan nodded slowly, knowing he could pay for it, but still wondering how far her kindness would go toward. As she walked away, Ethan felt a wave of confusion and curiosity. He had met thousands of people in his life, but very few who offered kindness without expecting anything in return. He wondered what kind of life Lena lived and why she carried such a gentle heart in the place filled with harsh voices. He watched her serve others, always with that same soft smile, and thought maybe this small diner held more truth about life itself. Tonight here, Ethan sat quietly, sipping the water she gave him and listening to the soft chatter around the room. He felt strangely invisible and yet strangely seen, because while most people ignored him, Lena had looked at him as if he mattered. He wondered how long he could continue this test, and what truths he would uncover if he stayed in this simple disguise. He knew the night was only beginning, and something important was waiting for him in the shadows. He thought about all the people who pretended to care for him in his real life, business partners who smiled only for deals, friends who stayed close only for fame, and gatherings that felt empty even with music and luxury. Here in this quiet diner, he finally saw a different side of humanity, a side that did not care about wealth or titles. He wondered if this journey would change him, and if he was ready for whatever truth. As Lena returned with his meal, Ethan felt his heart beat a little faster, not because of hunger, but because he knew this moment was the beginning of something unexpected. He had stepped out hoping to test the world, but now he realized the world was testing him too. He took the first bite, slowly tasting the simple food and feeling a warmth he had never found in fancy restaurants. He looked up at Lena and wondered what role the next morning arrived, with a soft gray sky and a cold breeze brushing against the empty streets. And Ethan Hawley walked the same road he had taken last night, still dressed in the same worn clothes. The disguise felt heavy on his body, but he welcomed it because it reminded him that today he would once again step into the world not as a billionaire, but as a simple man searching for truth. He felt a strange excitement in his chest as he approached the little diner again, wondering if the kindness he saw yesterday was real, or just a moment of luck when he pushed open the creaking door. The smell of warm bread and fresh coffee filled the air. The diner was already buzzing with tired workers and grumpy customers, and yet Ethan only looked for one face. Lena moved between tables, carrying plates with tired hands, but her smile remained gentle. Like a soft light in a dark place, she noticed Ethan standing near the counter, and instead of ignoring him like others did, she waved him over with the same kindness she showed the night before. Ethan took a seat by the window and watched her walk toward him. She asked if he had eaten breakfast, and Ethan shook his head slowly. She frowned with concern and told him to wait a moment. Then she hurried to the kitchen without even taking his order. He watched her move with quick footsteps, and for a moment he wondered why someone with such a warm heart worked in such a cold and noisy place. When Lena returned, she placed a plate of warm toast and eggs in front of him. Ethan hesitated and looked at the food, then at her. She noticed his expression and gently explained that the meal was on the house. She said he looked like he needed something warm to start the day, and that nobody should face the morning on an empty stomach. Ethan felt a tightness in his chest as he realized she was offering him more kindness than most people had ever offered him, even when they knew he was rich. Customers stared and whispered, wondering why she was giving free food to a man who looked like he could not afford even a cup of coffee. But Lena ignored their judgment and stayed focused on making sure Ethan felt safe and comfortable. Ethan watched her walk away and felt a mix of guilt and admiration. He had always believed money shaped people, but here was someone proving him wrong without even knowing it. As he ate the simple meal, slowly he noticed Lena rubbing her wrist as if it hurt. He had seen her work non-stop since he arrived, and even the night before she moved from table to table with little rest. He wondered how long she had been working like this, and what burden she carried behind her soft smile. Curiosity grew inside him, like a spark turning into a slow, steady flame. When Lena returned to check on him, Ethan tried to speak but stopped himself. He could not reveal who he really was, not yet. Instead, he thanked her quietly, and she smiled at him with a softness that made him feel strangely seen. She told him he reminded her of someone who used to visit the diner long ago, someone who was always alone and always hungry. She said she never forgot him because kindness was the only thing she could offer people like that, and she believed every small act mattered. Ethan listened carefully and wondered who that person was and whether he had ever received such gentle kindness in his earlier life. He realized that despite all his wealth, he had never sat and talked with someone like Lena, someone who gave without caution and cared without being asked. He watched her walk back to the counter and felt a growing urge to understand her world. Another customer shouted rudely for more coffee, and Lena rushed to help, spilling a little on her apron. Ethan watched as the manager scolded her loudly, blaming her for wasting time, even though she was the only one working hard. She bowed her head slightly and apologized even though she had done nothing wrong. Ethan clenched his fists under the table, feeling anger rise inside him, anger at the way she was treated and anger at himself because he could not yet step in without revealing the truth. A moment later, Lena returned to his table, pretending everything was fine. She told him he could stay as long as he liked because the morning rush would calm down soon. Ethan nodded, but inside he felt more determined than before to stay by her side. At least for now, he wanted to watch over her, even if she never knew who he truly was. As the hours passed, Lena continued to serve others with the same gentle care, and Ethan stayed quietly observing every detail, every moment of her day. He noticed how she laughed at small jokes from kind customers, how her smile faded whenever the manager walked by, and how she hid her own exhaustion so others would not worry. By the time the sun rose higher, Ethan realized something important. The kindness she showed him was not an accident. It was part of who she was, and that truth made him feel something deep and powerful, something he could not describe yet. But he knew one thing: he would keep returning to this diner. He wanted to learn more about Lena, and he wanted to understand the world she lived in, because for the first time in a long time, He felt something real growing inside him, something more valuable than all the money he owned. The sun was sinking low when Ethan returned to the little diner, and the warm orange light outside made the place looked softer than before, yet inside the air felt heavy and rushed, and he could already sense that something different waited for him. Today he stepped through the door, slowly hoping Lena would notice him the way she always did, and hoping her smile would still shine through the noise and stress, even though she looked exhausted the night before. Lena was wiping a table while balancing a stack of plates, and her hair was tied in a loose, messy bun that showed how long her shift had been. She spotted Ethan near the corner, and her tired face lit up with a gentle smile that felt like a warm blanket in a cold night. She walked toward him with steady steps, even though her body looked like it wanted rest more than anything, and Ethan felt a deep pull toward her kindness. Again she asked if he had eaten yet, and Ethan shook his head with a shy, grateful look. She nodded and hurried to the kitchen without asking for money. Just like before, Ethan watched her move and felt a strange ache in his heart, because no one had ever taken care of him without expecting something in return, and he wondered why she chose to care for a stranger when she already carried so much weight on her own shoulders. When Lena returned, she placed a bowl of warm soup in front of him and said it was left over from lunch, so he did not need to worry about paying for it. Her voice was soft and genuine, and Ethan felt something shift inside him, like a quiet understanding that kindness did not come from wealth or power, but from a simple heart that wanted to help others. She asked him if he was managing all right, and he nodded even though he wished he could tell her everything. As he ate, he kept watching Lena and noticing small details he had missed before. He noticed how she limped slightly on her right foot, as if she had hurt it. He noticed how she forced a smile whenever a rude customer complained, and he noticed how she hid her pain by focusing on others. He felt guilt rise inside him, because while he lived in a world of comfort, she lived in a world that asked more from her than she could give, yet she never stopped giving. After the dinner rush slowed, Lena finally sat down across from him for a brief moment, something she never did with other customers. She asked where he slept, and Ethan hesitated, knowing he could not reveal his real home, so he told her he was staying wherever he could find a safe spot. She looked worried and offered him a small blanket from the supply closet, even though she said she might get in trouble for giving it away. Ethan stared at her in disbelief, unable to understand how someone with so little could still give so much. Before he could thank her, the diner door opened loudly, and a group of noisy customers barged in, complaining about slow service and cold plates. Even though they had just arrived, the manager glared at Lena and barked orders, blaming her for not being faster, even though she had been working nonstop since morning. Lena bowed her head slightly and hurried to serve them, while Ethan watched with anger burning quietly in his chest, his hands clenched around the edge of the table as he wished he could protect her somehow. When the crowd finally left, Lena returned to Ethan with tired eyes and a shaken breath, and she apologized for leaving him alone, even though he knew she had done nothing wrong. He told her he was fine, and she smiled faintly, though her smile looked weaker. Now she moved to clean another table, but her hands trembled slightly, and Ethan stood up without thinking and offered to help wipe down the counter. She laughed softly and said customers were not allowed behind the counter, but thanked him for the thought. They talked for a little while longer, and Ethan learned that Lena had been working double shifts for weeks because one of her co-workers had quit suddenly, and she could not refuse extra hours since she needed the money to support her mother. Ethan listened with growing admiration because she spoke about her struggles, without bitterness, without anger, just quiet acceptance and strength. He felt something deep settle inside him, something that told him he was meant to be here in this place with her at this moment. When closing time approached, Lena gave Ethan the blanket she had promised and told him to stay warm during the cold night. He wanted to tell her the truth more than anything, but fear held him back, fear that she would look at him differently, fear that her kindness would change when she realized he was not the poor man she saw, but a billionaire living a lie. He stepped outside, clutching the blanket close, and watched Her locked the diner door before walking away into the dim night. As Ethan stood under the streetlight, he felt the world shift around him, slowly, like a heavy curtain being pulled aside. He knew he would return tomorrow, not just because he wanted to continue his test, but because he wanted to understand Lena more. He wanted to see how someone with so little light around her could still shine so brightly. He walked into the night feeling something powerful growing inside him, something he no longer wanted to ignore, knowing this was only the beginning of a truth he was not ready to face yet. The next day arrived with heavy clouds stretching across the sky, and Ethan walked toward the diner with a strange tightness in his chest. He had barely slept even with the blanket Lena gave him, because his mind kept replaying every moment from yesterday, her smile, her kindness, her tired eyes hiding quiet pain. He knew today would not be easy. Something in the air felt unsettled, like a storm waiting to break, and he braced himself as he pushed open the diner door. Inside the diner, the energy felt different, louder, sharper, filled with stress and impatient voices, and Ethan immediately noticed that Lena was moving faster than usual. Her steps were rushed, her hands trembling slightly as she carried plates from table to table. She did not see Ethan right away, and when she finally did, her smile appeared, but it was smaller, weaker, as if she was forcing herself to stay strong. Ethan sat quietly and waited for her to come over, but before she could, the manager, Mr. Garrison, stomped across the floor with anger written all over his face. He was a large man with a harsh voice and eyes that never softened. He shouted at Lena for being slow and accused her of messing up an order, even though Ethan had just arrived and knew she had not made any mistake. Lena apologized softly, even though she was not at fault, and Ethan felt heat rise in his chest as he watched her bow her head so the manager would stop yelling. Lena finally reached Ethan's table and gently asked if he wanted something to eat. Her voice carried a tired tremble, and Ethan nodded quietly, though his eyes stayed fixed on the manager in silent anger. Lena brought him a bowl of soup and a small piece of bread, telling him she managed to save it before the lunch crowd finished everything. Ethan noticed the fading bruise on her wrist and wondered if the job was hurting her more than she admitted. As he ate slowly, Ethan watched Mr. Garrison pace the diner, inspecting tables and muttering under his breath. He seemed to take pleasure in finding faults, and he constantly snapped at Lena for even the smallest thing, dropping a fork, wiping a surface too slowly, or delivering a plate 30 seconds late. Ethan felt frustration building inside him, so strong he had to grip the edge of the table to keep from standing up and revealing exactly who he was, but he knew he could not yet break his cover. After a few minutes, Lena returned to refill Ethan's water, and he asked quietly if she was all right. She tried to smile and said she was fine, but her eyes told a different story. They looked tired, broken. Even as she tried to act strong, she admitted her shift was longer today because 2 workers had called in sick, and the manager blamed her for everything that went wrong. She said she did not want to complain because complaining never helped, and she needed to keep her job no matter what. Ethan felt guilt stabbed through him because he had the power to change everything for her, but he still chose to hide behind his disguise. He wished he could tell her the truth, wish he could take her away from this cruel environment, but he stayed silent as she hurried off to serve another table, leaving him alone with growing anger and helplessness. Afternoon continued, and the diner grew louder, filled with impatient customers. Lena rushed between tables, doing the work of 3 people, yet every time she passed the manager, he criticized her, telling her she was too slow, too clumsy, too distracted. At one point, a rude customer spilled his drink and blamed Lena, even though she had not touched the table. Mr. Garrison did not care. He scolded Lena harshly in front of everyone, causing her eyes to shimmer with unshed tears. Ethan stood up slightly from his seat, ready to defend her, but Lena caught his gaze and shook her head, gently begging him not to interfere. He sat back down, fighting the urge to reveal everything because he knew she feared losing her job more than enduring the cruel words around her. She returned to serving with shaky hands, but her smile never fully disappeared, even though it looked fragile, like glass ready to break. As the evening light dimmed, The noise inside the diner finally softened, and most customers left. Lena carried a heavy tray toward the kitchen, and Ethan followed her, slowly stopping near the doorway. He wanted to tell her that she deserved better. But before he could speak, Mr. Garrison appeared again, shouting loud enough to echo through the empty diner. He accused Lena of giving free food to a poor customer, and Ethan knew instantly the manager was talking about him. Lena tried to explain that the food she gave him was leftover and would have been thrown away anyway, but Mr. Garrison refused to listen. He shouted that she was stealing from the diner and breaking company rules, and then the words Ethan feared came out. He told Lena she was fired and demanded she turn in her apron. Immediately, Ethan felt the world freeze around him as Lena's face collapsed in shock and pain. Lena begged the manager to reconsider, saying she needed the job, saying she would work harder, saying she could not afford to be without income. But Mr. Garrison did not care. He grabbed the apron from her hand and pointed to the door, ordering her to leave. Ethan stepped forward instinctively, but Lena again shook her head, quietly telling him without words that she did not want him to get involved. She walked out of the diner with trembling shoulders, and Ethan followed her into the cold night. Watching her wipe away silent tears as she clutched her arms, Ethan felt something inside him snap. He could not stay silent anymore. He knew now that his undercover test had gone far enough. He knew that tomorrow everything would change because Lena lost her job because of him, and he could no longer pretend to be powerless in her world. Lena walked down the dark street with slow steps, holding her thin jacket close against the cold night, and Ethan followed a few steps behind, afraid to get too close, yet unable to leave her alone. She had just lost her job because of him, and every part of him felt heavy with guilt. Though she did not know the truth, she moved like someone carrying a mountain on her back, and Ethan knew she was trying not to cry, even though her eyes shined with silent pain each time she blinked while the night wind whispered through the empty street. Ethan finally stepped beside her and gently called her name, and she stopped. Though she did not look at him, her voice was small when she asked why he was following her, and Ethan struggled for an answer. He could not tell her the truth, not yet, so he told her he wanted to make sure she reached home safely. She shook her head, saying she did not want anyone to worry about her, but Ethan could hear the hurt hidden under her calm tone, and he knew she needed someone to stand with her, even if she said otherwise. Lena walked toward a small old bus stop and sat on the metal bench, holding her apron in her hands, even though it was no longer hers. Ethan sat beside her without asking, and the silence between them felt heavy. She told him the diner job was the only steady income she had, and that losing it would make things even harder for her mother, who needed medicine. Every month she tried to smile while explaining, but her voice cracked, and Ethan felt each crack like a blow to his chest. He wished he could tell her he could fix everything. She wiped her eyes quickly and said she would find another job soon, maybe in a store or a gas station. Though she knew those jobs did not pay enough, she tried to act brave, but her hands shook, and Ethan could not pretend he did not see it. He wanted to tell her she deserved better, but she kept talking, saying she did not want pity or sympathy from anyone, and that life had taught her to stand up again. No matter how hard things became, Ethan admired her strength, but the admiration only made his guilt grow stronger. Ethan gently asked if she had eaten anything since morning, and Lena admitted she had not eaten because she spent her money on her mother's medicine. She said she would be fine, but her voice wavered again. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out the small piece of bread she had given him the day before and offered it back to her, saying she needed it more. She refused at first, insisting he keep it, but Ethan pushed it gently into her hands, and she finally accepted it, holding it like something precious, even though it was just simple. After a long moment of quiet, Lena whispered that she felt ashamed for being fired in front of everyone, and Ethan told her softly that she had done nothing wrong. She asked how he could be so sure, and he almost revealed the truth, but stopped himself at the last second, saying only that he had seen everything and knew her heart was good. At him with surprise, as if she did not understand why a stranger would defend her, and that look made Ethan feel a painful warmth inside his chest. A warmth sharper than anything. Lena stood from the bench and said she needed to go home before it grew too late, and Ethan rose with her, offering to walk with her until she reached her apartment. She tried to decline, but he insisted gently, saying she should not walk alone after such a hard day. She finally agreed, and they walked side by side through the quiet streets lit only by soft streetlights. She told him stories about her mother and how they used to laugh even in hard times, and Ethan listened closely, feeling her words settle deep in his heart. Like as they reached the narrow stairway leading to Lena's apartment building, she paused and turned to thank Ethan for walking with her, and her voice carried a softness he had not heard before. She said she did not understand why he cared so much, but she was grateful for his presence, especially on a night when she felt completely lost. Ethan wanted to tell her everything, wanted to explain who he really was, but fear held him silent. She waved goodbye slowly and climbed the steps, leaving Ethan standing there with a heart full of guilt, hope, and determination. Inside, morning arrived with soft pale light spilling across the city, and Ethan stood inside his grand office for the first time in days, wearing his true face. Again, the billionaire face, polished, powerful, unreachable. Yet nothing inside him felt the same anymore. He looked at his reflection in the tall glass window and barely recognized the man staring back. He thought of Lena walking home in the cold darkness after losing her job because of him, and a sharp pain ran through his heart. He knew today he would no longer hide the truth. He knew today everything would change. Assistant entered with a respectful bow, carrying documents and updates for the day, but Ethan raised a hand and told him to prepare something unusual. He wanted a limousine brought to a certain neighborhood, a small basket of warm food prepared by the company chef, and a private medical team on standby for an unnamed patient. The assistant blinked in surprise but nodded quickly, sensing the weight in Ethan's voice. Ethan then called the head of his company's charity division, ordering them to come immediately because he needed their help for someone important, someone who did not even know how important she was. Meanwhile, Lena woke up slowly in her tiny apartment, feeling the heaviness of yesterday still wrapped around her like a thick blanket. She stared at the ceiling, trying to gather her strength, but her heart felt tired. Her mother called from the next room, asking if she was all right, and Lena forced a small answer, saying she was fine, though she felt anything but fine. She wondered how she would tell her mother she had lost the job she depended on. She wondered how she would pay for next month's medicine. She wondered how someone could work so hard, yet fall so easily. She stood by the window, rubbing her cold hands together when she heard the sound of a car outside. Not just any car, but something loud, powerful, smooth. She peeked out and froze in shock, because a long black limousine was parked right in front of her building, the kind of car she had only seen on television, the kind of car that belonged to someone from a world she could never enter. Before she could think, a man in a sharp suit stepped out and looked up at her window, then walked toward her building entrance. A few minutes later, a gentle knock echoed across her small living room. Lena opened the door cautiously, and the suited man bowed slightly, asking if she was Miss Lena. He then asked her to come with him because someone important wished to see her. She felt confused, frightened, unsure, but something in the man's respectful tone made her nod. She followed him down the stairs with her heart racing, unsure if she was stepping into danger or a strange dream. She walked toward the waiting limousine, and the door opened slowly, revealing Ethan sitting inside, wearing a suit that made him look like another person entirely. Lena froze on the spot, staring at him with wide, confused eyes. He looked nothing like the poor, quiet man she had served at the diner. He looked like someone powerful, someone wealthy, someone she could never imagine sitting on a cheap diner stool. She asked in a trembling voice who he really was, and Ethan stood from the seat, stepping out into the open air, his voice soft and sincere as he told her his real name, his full name. Ethan Hawley, the billionaire. Everyone talked about the man she had unknowingly fed and helped again and again. Lena felt her legs weaken as shock washed over her. She could barely speak, and when she finally found her voice, she asked why he had lied. Ethan explained slowly that he had wanted to understand how people treated someone with nothing, and that she had been the only one who saw him as a person, not a burden, not a tool, not a walking fortune. He told her she had shown him a kind of kindness he had never received in his entire life, and that he never expected to feel so changed by I. Apologized deeply for hiding the truth, and for the pain she faced because of his disguise. Lena listened with tears rising in her eyes, not from anger, but from the overwhelming mix of confusion, fear, and relief.